as they are happening.
An aggression of the Arab national security, as well as the tackling of taking the proper measurement accordingly. Your Highness, Excellencies, the Foreign Ministers of the Arab delegations, His Excellency Mr. General Secretary Ahmed Abul Ghait, the General Secretary of the LAS, Your Highness, Ambassadors, permanent representatives, good esteemed public, and peace be upon you all. We meet today in a very emergency meeting to tackle and address the repercussions of the Turkish aggression affected by the Syrian Republic, which is considered is a gross aggression for sovereignty, its independence, and the unity of its soils, as well as leading to more conflict in Syria and the region, as well as undermine the efforts of the international community to end or to put an end of the suffering of the Syrian public. Such an irrigation is a very dangerous and serious escalation that would lead to the more suffering of the Syrian people and enhance the ability of the terrorists to unite them, as well as the international community in confronting the terrorist organization, in particular the terroristic organization of Daesh that threatened the countries of the region and the world as a serious threat of the peace and security all over. And in particular Iraq, which is still suffering the devastated effects of the confronting the Daesh, the terrorist organization, Iranians. So we call upon for this podium the League of Arab States to play a very important role in such and to stand behind the Syrian Republic and activated membership in the LAS, and we're calling upon the international community to shoulder their responsibility regarding the Turkish invasion by a speedy movement of putting an end of the military act and finding peaceful solutions for the Syrian people. Your Highness, the Iraqis again calling up the irrigation of such an invasion and encourage everybody to engage in a democratic process that guarantee all the components of the Syrian, in particular after the forming of the Constitutional Committee to write a new constitution for the Syrian Republic, and peace be upon you all. I call upon now, ladies and gentlemen, His Highness, the General Secretary, to say his speech. Thank you, Mr. President, Your Highness, Miss Excellencies of Ministers, the heads of the Arab delegations. Our urgent meeting should put the dot on the words. Such an aggressive military operation in the east north of Syria that has only one name, which is the invasion and aggression. An aggression of the sovereignty of such an Arab soil, then it's a condemning invasion, no matter what is the causes of the invader. It is called a very rejected and condemned invasion that is outlawed of the legitimacy under the international law, and it's a fact, and no one is deny the very complicated situation of the Syrian that lasted more than 8 years, that led to the absence of the Syrian Republic to stay in its position in the LAS. Such a very temporarily complicated position cannot be considered as a pretext to taking the Syrian of an Arab nation. It's a refounded member that was and is still their land is Arab land, and it's a part of the Arabic security. Such an invasion of a picture that we see today on the unity of the Syrian soil, that is a threat of the collective Arab security. Yes, agendas and foreign interests have conflicted for years on the soil land on the background of a very gross war that divided such a country. Such a council and a meeting have condemned any form of invasion and intervention of the Syrian land, which considered the length of its crisis that we can witness today from the Turkish side. It's in a very different form of its extent. Such a Turkish invasion as planned leads to taking a soil of the Syrian land of a depth that reaches 32 kilometers and of a length that would overcome 400 kilometers and replacing more inhabitants of the refugees in the Turkish land, which they are Syrian. So if it is not an invasion, so how would we call it? The very early hours have witnessed the flee of tens of thousands of their homes, and the number is counted along with the continuation of the operation based on some estimation to be more than 300,000 citizens. There are real fears of ethnic cleansing of such land, yet the plans of demographic plans of inhabitants and others, as the Turkish side has announced, in fact it is in a very human and moral shame that is illegal on the whole line of the international law, that to return to the dignified life for the refugees. What we've heard of using the refugees as an gambling paper before the European side that reflects in a very unprecedented deviation. Such a pressure of the refugees has nothing to do with Islam, humanity and morals. From our side, as we could argue a lot of what have the Syrian part have reached. It is a part of a part of responsibility of each one. Either they are Kurdish or Arab Syrian, they are Arabs, so that we are affected from their pains. Some would have some reservation of agendas and aims and the behaviors of the Kurdish organization that do not actually serve the interest of the Syrian part, but it is still a part of the Syrian fabrics and the international. Yet we point out what the bird of blood as a result of the Daesh nightmare of the east of Syria. We cannot adapt that, cannot be fled or cleansed from their homes, that many of them came from different places that Turkey have attacked from before. Such a Turkish aggression would lead to new crises, new refugees and flees, and other sufferings from the human side that is countless. Maybe the main danger is that would threaten the achievement made in the confrontation of the organization of Daesh. There are more than 7,000 members belonging to the Daesh in areas that Turkey is in a bid to occupy, among which 4,000 of the foreign fighters. The Turkish aggression in light of such outcomes do not represent a threat of the regional stability, but could be considered a real threat of the peace and security that we call upon the international community to shoulder its responsibility. As such, it is unfortunate that the Security Council have failed to tackle such an aggression because of some differences, in particular the permanent members of the Security Council. I urge the Security Council as a reference of the international community to shoulder its responsibility of such a very serious matter and reach a unified international stance to condemn such an aggression and remove its repercussions. We condemn the aggression, so we call upon Turkey of an immediate ceasefire of its military operation and withdraw their forces within the Syrian land and will build them in a full responsibility of the human and security repercussions as such. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. General Secretary. Your Highness, I have a call to have a very concise speech, and if I wish to deliver this speech to be for the records by the name of their delegations. And thank you. We'll give the floor now for the speech of the Arab Republic of Egypt. Mr. President Al-Hakim, the president of the meeting of the last on the foreign ministerial level, Your Excellency, Mr. Ahmed Abulghita, the General Secretary of the last, Your Excellencies, peace be upon you all. We meet today as Turkey is opening a new chapter of its repetitive aggressions of the sovereignty in a very beloved Arab country. As the founder of the last, taking an advantage of the circumstances of Syria to execute their plans of revive an era that have passed a long time ago by exporting this in our Arab nation. Such a Turkish aggression is trying to cover on the pretext of confronting terrorism, which is trigger the sarcasm that would has a very effective of the responsibility of Turkey in supporting the terrorist groups in the region and have them their harbors in facilitate the transfer of the terrorist fighters within the Arab countries. Therefore, the allegations of the Turkish side as described is confronted to the terrorism is only leading to the rushness of the Turkish side to mix the purpose and covering their sponsorship of such terrorist groups. The Turkish side is trying to get away of such an aggression by attempting the extracting an area of the Syrian and changing its demographics that would lead to crimes against humanity according to the international law. The Arab people is looking forward for such a meeting and waiting for a very strong Arab stances that meet the grasp of such a challenge and taking a very urgent measures of determined in attempt to maintain and reserve the unity of the Syrian people and ease their sufferings. Your Excellencies, the Arab Republic of Egypt in a strong words have condemned such allegations in the Syrian land that cannot be considered except an unprecedented and unacceptable aggression of on a very Arabic land. Hence, we are reaffirm the full refusal of the Egyptian side in the intervention that lead the instability of Arabic land. Such an aggression is a gross breach and violation of the rules and the laws of the international community, in particular Decree 2254 that represent a direct threat of the Arab national security, that it is very clear the repercussions of such an aggression for everyone, whether to divide the Syrian fabrics or the attempting of activating or triggering a bloody crisis and conflicts, or the annulment of the results of the victories that cost a lot against the terrorist organization of Daesh and open new doors before new organizations of terrorism in order to restore such lands they've lost before. Such a responsibility that should lead the spread of the terrorism once again, or the return of new terrorist groups to practice their activities in the Middle East area as large. The representatives of the Security Council should bear the responsibility to confront such an aggression and the misuse of the international laws. The Turkish side is trying actually to get advantage of the very painful circumstances lived by the Syrian people as a pretext of such an aggression that should be considered, let us to consider to name it as it is, that violate and breach all the international laws, and the Syrian people should have the right of self-defense, and as chartered in the United Nations in the Article 151, and the international community should take the proper measurements to force the Turkish side to withdraw immediately and unconditionally, as well as hold everyone is responsible, accountable of such practices practiced on the Syrian soil. Egypt would be in the front of each Arabic efforts to hold them accountable, in particular that the early indicators would explain the numbers of the suffering that reach hundreds of thousands for the Syrian side. Your Highness, Excellencies, such a very gross aggression came in a time that of the Syrian crisis would witness a very breakthrough of their crisis effective the last days of this month. It is also to provide very proper circumstances for negotiations to reach a peaceful settlement, to put an end of a very long war, and to regain its stability and meet their patients that are legitimate. We should all, in particular, in this all, have a historical responsibility to stand beside the Syrian people and put an end to such an aggression and open and pave the way to put another end of such a crisis. The whole will be accounted for those led such an aggression to happen. And we pray to the Almighty God to have our efforts succeeded for the interests of the Syrian country and the Arab nation. And thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. We'll give the floor for the Sheikh Al-Sabah, the representative of the Al-Kuwait. Thank you. I agree upon what you've said of the very consultative meeting, and I'll give my speech for the records, and I'll give the floor for Mr. Ayman al-Safadi. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, prayer on behalf on the Prophet Muhammad, Your Excellency Dr. Ali Al-Hakim, the President of Iraq, Your Excellency General Secretariat of the the League of Arabic States, representative for the Republic of Egypt. I thank you, Mr. Sameh, for your invitation of such a meeting. The Hashemite Jordan Kingdom is refusing and rejecting such an aggression that would lead to the divisions, the instability of the Syrian lands. And I call upon the international community to put an end to such an aggression. The only way is the peaceful solutions and settlement to put an end to such a very drastic crisis that caused a human suffering that should be lifted on the Arab Syrian brotherly people and weakened the hope of the Arab nation and undermined the collective security. Therefore, our interests hence therefore require, as well as the national security, to reach a peaceful solution accepted by the Syrians and to maintain the Syrian unity and regain their stability. That should be a priority that require all of us to take a very practical steps to achieve. And I call upon to activate the collective and Arabic efforts in order to reach a peaceful solution to put an end of such a crisis that the Syrian people is the number one effective that would made our area and a spread of the terrorism, and for Syria to regain its principle and role of such a very joint Arab role. Such a step, which is the foremost, the Constitutional Committee, that require all of us, the Arab, to contribute in the success of such an effort. Your Excellencies and Highness, the security of Syria, their neighbors and the regions is the only path of reaching a peaceful solution to maintain the unity, the sovereignty, the integrity of the Syrian people. It is a must, by seeking such an urgent solution, to all cooperate to provide a very kind and solution for such people for the time to come, to return back voluntarily. That such circumstances cannot be acceptable, that require all our efforts from the Arab side and the international community. Syria is an Arabic country of a long history of contributions within the Arab efforts, and their pains is ours for the Syrian and the national security of the Arabs in the region, and for the international peace and security. Such a crisis should be ended, and our role should be bigger, more effective, and more fruitful. And thank you very much, and peace be upon you all. Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Minister. I'll give the floor to Mr. Ali Adil Al-Jubair, the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most passionate, Your Excellency, Mr. Al-Hakim, the Foreign Minister of the Iraq, the President of such edition of the ministerial meeting, Your Excellencies, Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you all. In the outset, I would like to thank the Arab Republic of Egypt to convene such an irregular meeting in order to address the dangers of the current situation of the north of the eastern Syrian as a result of the very dangerous Turkish aggression. The Kingdom of the Kingdom of the Saudi Arabia is condemned to such an act, and we call upon the international community to shoulder its responsibility to double the targeted effort to put an end of such an aggression that is considered the violation of the Syrian unity, regardless of the excuses. The dangers of such an aggression is effectively resulted on the region, as well as doubling the international effort of confronting the organization of Daesh that form the dangers of deepen the human crisis and sufferings of the Syrian people. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is affirming their stance beside the Syrian people in preserving the independence and the sovereignty of the Syrian land, as we affirm our support of the peaceful solution to the crisis based on the Security Council resolution, as well as the extraction of all the armed groups in Syria. To conclude, we pray to Almighty God to have a successful solution to the aiming the put an end of the Syrian crisis. And thank you. I'll give the floor to Dr. Anwar Gagash, the representative of the United Arab Emirates. Your Excellency, Mr. Al-Hakim, the Foreign Minister of the Iraq, the President of such a meeting of the last, Your Excellencies, and Excellency General Secretary Ahmed Abul Ghait, the General Secretary of the last, ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you all. I would like to thank very much the Arab Republic of Egypt for very constructive role and their call upon to have this meeting that aiming to address the military Turkish aggression to the Syrian land, and also I would hail and praise their support of the members of such a meeting. Your Excellencies and Your Highness, we come on today in a time that our nation is living an unprecedented challenges and experiencing a very dangerous period that require a very reasonable reaction in light of the role of some that threaten the unity of a brotherly Arab country. Such an aggression is represented in a very gross violation and on the sovereignty of a brotherly Arab nation. and disable the region. In such, the United Arab Emirates is reaffirming its condemnation in strong words of such an aggression by the Turkish side as considered a very rejected deed, and rejecting any deeds would lead to any result of such an aggression that violated the international norms. Our work that require to come up with a very decisive effort that is considered an aggression on the national security of the Arab region. That and we also require the extraction of any members on the Syrian land, and affirming the necessity of the Arab role and not to leave the Syrian future for foreign intervention. As such, the UAE is expressing the necessity of effective the Syrian role, and such an aggression should require us to take all the required measurements to put an end to such an aggression. The United Arab Emirates is expressing their deep concern of the result of such aggression that would double the suffering of the presently Syrian people, and such an aggression recorded killing of innocents and verifying peaceful people, as that would lead to a more of a human crisis. In short, it would be having a new human crisis, especially in order that the winter is approaching. As a result of the intervention of the Iranian side for such an presently land, that require the international community for a decisive stance, and to call upon the extraction of any foreign forces and reaching the peaceful solution, which is be considered the only and the sole solution. The UAE is supporting the peaceful solution, the effort of the UN convoy, according to the resolution of Geneva, to maintain the sovereignty of the Syrian land. The UAE is affirming, is exerting all the effort to contribute to the international effort to ease the sufferings of the Syrian people. It is clearly noted that the Turkish intervention that would lead the enhancing the ability of the terrorism to be reunited, that would pose a threat for the international community. Among the big fears of using the members of the Daesh, of the repercussions of such an aggression. Hence, we reaffirm the refusal of any outcomes that come out of such an aggression. The repercussions are gross, which is a result of the current Arab division that cannot be dealt without the activations of the Arab interventions, of the Arab role of any foreign intervention. And the Arab choices should be present, and to contribute of putting an end in the chapter of the foreign Syrian line. To conclude, the UAE is re-thanking all the efforts exerted of having such a meeting to convene, in particular in the light of the current dangerous development that require an urgent move of putting an end of such a crisis, and that would meet the ambitions of the Syrian peoples. And thank you, Mr. Minister. And now I'll give the floor to Mr. Gibran Sibi, the representative of Lebanon. Thank you, Mr. President. Your Highness and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, so we're not going to be against Turkey. We meet today for Syria in the within or at the absence of Syria. Yet we are here for the Syrian side. It is a high time for having serious position in the League of the Arab States, and it's a high time to put an end for the terrorism, and it is a high time of the returning of the absent member, or should we wait of the roles from anywhere except the Arab role that has a responsibility of having a very prideful light to condemn such an aggression on a Syrian land. Unless we, or rather we should avoid the loss of the Syrian people and powers and avoid a divided power that affected us all, one state by another, starting by Lebanon and ended with Syria. Your Highness, the Syrian people fled and left their homes and scattered throughout the whole world as refugees looking for peace and security. The world, countries from all over the world have intervened, and the other people, such as the Iraqi people and others, paid high prices in the light of the European and different countries of intervention, and some stayed still, leaving the Syrian people facing the mechanism of fire and killing, and the flee being blocked in the name of the voluntary return, cities destructed in the name of the peaceful solution requested by people to be presided by security and construction. Today, some may say that the interest of the Lebanon in supporting the military Turkish aggressions, whereas is seeking a peaceful zone for the return of the Syrian refugees, by paving the way of another return of the Lebanese people in such a peaceful zone. And others may think that the interests of Lebanon as a result of the operation to prevent of the Kurdish establishment that threatened the unity of four countries, Iran, Turkey, Syria and Iraq, that if established would constitute other divided establishment that Lebanon never aimed before, therefore their end. Yet the Lebanese stances based on principle, politics and Arab vision, that such an aggression cannot be faced or met by a very collective stance that protect any Arab countries as Syria, as big or small as Lebanon, for their dignities. Only the right and principle of justice, international law would pave the way for a sustainable protection. Therefore, I thank the Arab Republic of Egypt for its call of having such a meeting, and I call upon you all to support the call. I've said it in such a place more than 1 year ago for the return of the Syrian position in its empty seat. My partner, so that we are requested just to have more than world condemnation, so that we are called upon of taking an Arab stances by having a very convened summit of the Arab nations to put the confrontation plans of what have been piloted. And if they are not taken this seriously, paid by the Turkish intentions of having any harm, so it is not allowed for us to accept any Israeli or Turkish aggression on an Arabic country or nor Arabic people, and it is not allowed to be frightful from each others and fear of democracies and human rights. My question is, what is stopping us today of opening new channels among all of us seeking internal peace, or opening fighting fronts in a bid of peace, pursuing into external peace? History is the best mentor that would benefit all of us, or to avoid its lessons, so that we cannot just stay still by not reading in the history. The frank dialogue is the only solution, without having any suspicions of such a solution, by thinking that the secret talks would give him the victory, or to avoid him the real threat, or by thinking that they can make their way peacefully and thoroughly to the shore of peace and security, and to have us to reach all together on this. Otherwise no one would make their ways to such a very peaceful shore, and led to a great devastation that is bigger than what we see now. Your Excellencies, very good mixture of reality and principality is the only solution. The temporary one is hindering the possible solution, and the branch principality cannot lead to a solution. So we've already, or we've been requesting this before, by rejecting, based on our principle that would lead to the preservation of the national unity vis-a-vis any foreign and external agendas. And how many countries boycotting us because of our stances. Hence today, facing such a reality, by expressing to the same scenario and without and staying still, which their right, without rejecting to deal with them by knowing their circumstances and by respecting their potentials. Such a bad past should be left behind us, and look forward of our today, that we are called upon to work all together and to be beside the voice of the Syrian people, and taking all the deterrent measurements that any Arab unity is in a very absolute commitment from our side, and it is in a very urgent strategies by looking to any repercussions of demographic divisions on any name, by a very peaceful zone or a protecting line or a very temporal foreign presence that cannot be there on a very that cannot be there that would lead for a permanent presence. It is our response, it is our right, it is the only key by regaining the lost nations and countries. Long live the Arab countries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Minister. And now we'll give the floor to Sheikh Khalid Al Khalifa, the Foreign Minister of the Bahrain State. In the name of Allah, Mr. Ali Al Hakim, the Foreign Minister of the Iraq, the President of the Foreign Ministerial Meeting and Council, Your Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, in the name of Allah, it is clear and crystal as we listen to the brotherly ministers, listen to their stances, and we thank very much the Arab Republic of Egypt of their call and invitation for having this meeting to address the aggressive aggression by the Turkish side on the Syria land that affirm the big role of the Egyptian side. Our stance in front of such an aggression, whether it is from the Turkish or Iranian, nor the Israeli aggression, that would make us fully aware of such a stance and not deny the sources of dangers and threats on the Arab nations. When we talk about the Syrian matter, Syria, even though isn't here in our meeting yet, their seat is still available. Its membership there, even if it is frozen, and the crisis in our heart, then we have our responsibility and duty for having the Syrian people to live peacefully and in prosperity. We are looking forward to have the position of the General Secretary to be a representative for the international community and the Syrian people or the Syrian crisis to be in its priority, in top priority. So the clear political cover in Syria is the framework of the Constitutional Committee that has been formed lately, that require support, and we look forward to the stability of the Syrian people. Otherwise, we are legitimize any measurement, aggression affected by Syria or other countries. The last point, if you allow me, is the importance of the maintenance of the national security in the Arab region in a very comprehensive way, not just to respond to the events and incidents upon the occurrence. Now we are here in addressing to the latest incidents of the Syria, but other matters such as Jerusalem, Lebanon issues, or in Iraq. Lots of incidents require a very unified stance for dealing in such incidents. God willing, we are looking forward for the resolution that is expected to be issued of such a meeting, which is very important, have endorsed some letters and conveying the real and crystal message for the position in Syria, for its people, for its government, and for all the countries all over the world, the international community, for what is meant by Syria. It's the only message that I want to convey, and thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. And now we give the floor to His Excellency Khomaish Al-Jihawi, the Foreign Minister of Tunisia. Thank you, Mr. President, and Your Highness Mr. Ali Al-Hakim, Your Excellency Ahmed Abul Ghait, General Secretariat of the LAS. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation in the Arab region and the Middle East is experiencing a very unprecedented situations in the light of confronting crisis in the Syrian land, and such a meeting is and our stance is a result of our big concern of such a circumstance and such a new development in light of the Turkish aggression that represents a great threat for the international peace and security, and would lead also and great repercussions of the more fleas of the Syrian people and deepen the suffering of the Syrian people. Based on the resolutions of the Arab Summit, such as the resolutions issued in the last summit in Tunisia, that require a clear and a very unified stance before such intervention. Such an intervention we may hinder the efforts the effort exerted in order to reach a peaceful solution for the Syrian crisis and more interventions of the region. Mr. President, such a continuation of the crisis and aggression would trigger a crisis that all of us would be affected and undermine all the efforts in confronting terrorism and terrorist groups such as Daesh, and would pave them or to give them the chance to be reunited again. Therefore, we call upon all the international community to double their effort to hinder and put obstacles before such way that otherwise would threaten the whole countries neighboring Syria. Mr. President, Tunisia is recalling the more effort and avoiding more fighting and conflicts in the Syrian land, and to accelerate the effort in reaching peaceful solutions under the United Nations umbrella and enable Syria to regain their position and their seat on the League of Arab States. Tunisia is pushing all the peaceful efforts to end the conflicts in the regions and contribute to put an end to the chaos state and enabling the people of their concern